Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. We're delighted that you're with us. We hope you are well, staying safe, have vaccine dose 1 or 2 or moving toward it if you're eligible. And I want to mention to you 2 upcoming dates, actually perhaps 3. Rabbi Prosnit has invited Assemblyman Bramnick, member of our congregation, who is it Friday, Rabbi, this coming Friday at 12 noon?
February 5th.
February 5th. Oh, a week from Friday, 12 noon. You'll see that available on the e-blast. February 1 at 6 p.m. Congressman Malinowski is doing a briefing for the Jewish community on issues of anti-Semitism and other matters. Some will be covered today, but for that full program, if you would like to register for that, send me an email and I'll see to it that it gets to the right person if you'd like to be included in that. My email, as many of you know, is ravcak@aol.com. That's ravcak@aol.com. And on February 22 is our next Lunch and Learn Monday, and that's going to be a vision for Westfield. We're going to hear from Mayor Brindle, who's also with us today. And Mayor, we're delighted you're with us today, Mayor Brindle of Westfield. And that'll be a program presented by her and by Streetworks, which is a subsidiary of the Hudson Bay Corporation, who are the owners of Lord and Taylor. You all remember Lord and Taylor. And they have a special role for these coming months in reimagining downtown Westfield. And we'll have an opportunity to hear from them and interact with them. So that's February 22 at 11:30, our usual time. And that should be very, very exciting. Rabbi Prosnit, a few words of intro from you, if you would.
Yes, good morning, everyone. It's nice to be with you, Rabbi Kroloff, and of course, Congressman Malinowski and Mayor Brindle, and all of you. This past Friday, I talked about ritual. I reflected on the inauguration and how I found it deeply meaningful with all the specific rituals that were in place. And I charged our congregation a little bit to create more rituals in our own lives, set moments of transcendence in the small things and in the big things in our lives, not just an inauguration or a wedding or a celebration of some sort, but perhaps when you get a vaccine, perhaps when you do something else. So I think it's important to really recognize the moment we are in as a community and offer a prayer as we gather today to hear what's happening on a federal level, what's happening in our own community as well, and how we can be partners with our congressman, with our mayor, as a congregation to really continue to create equality, to create justice, to create peace and good health for us and our entire nation. So a blessing that you may have heard before when I've shared it a couple Shabbats ago. Every inch of America is sacred from sea to shining sea. There's much to be done in our time, the sort of hard work on which God smiles because it is done for the sake of dignity and well-being of all God's creatures. Together, let us work to preserve and make manifest the values upon which our democracy was founded. The task of all people of faith is to call governing authorities to fulfill God's purpose of bringing about justice, mercy, and peace. Individually and as a nation, may we heed our obligation to each other as we navigate the tensions of building a just society. Rather than a politics of divisiveness, may we move our country towards a politics of empathy. May we use our power well so we do great things for all God's creatures, all those made in God's image who yearn for an equal place at America's table. If we do all this, May grace and peace be ours in abundance. May we be a beacon and blessing to the world. And I invite you to say, Amen.
Amen.
I'll turn it over to you, Rabbi Kroloff, so we can begin our conversation.
Thank you, Rabbi. So, Congressman, as I thought about today, 3 dates just jump into my mind. November 3, January 6, and January 20. That's kind of, now, bookended. January 6th is bookended by the third, safe, most secure election perhaps in American history, and your re-election, for which there's an opportunity. I know it seems like ancient history now, but congratulations on your re-election. And of course, the inauguration and the terrible events of January 6th. I can't get out of my mind opening paragraph of Nicholas Kristof's column a couple of days ago. I don't want to depress you. I don't think it's depressing. It's actually hopeful. It was 1933 and Roosevelt had just announced the New Deal. And a visitor said visited Roosevelt and he said, Mr. President, you are either going to be the best president in history or the worst president in history. To which Roosevelt responded, if I'm the worst, I'm the last. Yep. It was almost that bad. It was almost that bad. But because of November 3 and January 20, we are hopeful. And we are also hopeful because you're our representative, and we're just delighted to welcome you again. You're a friend of Temple Emanu-El. You're a friend of our congregants, of the rabbis, and of Westfield. So, Congressman, it's yours. And then at the conclusion of introductory comments, we'll welcome your questions, which can be presented either in the chat room or by raising your hand. I guess chat room is probably best, right, Rabbi Prosnit? Either way.
Yeah, either way, or in the question and answer button at the bottom.
Oh yeah, question Q&A at the bottom, and Rabbi Prosnit's going to help us with some of the technical part there too. Congressman, welcome. We're delighted that you're well, that you and your colleagues are safe, and that you're moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rabbi Kroloff and Rabbi Prosnit, and wonderful to see you, Mayor Brindle, as well. I've always enjoyed these sessions and look forward to actually doing the lunch part with you guys next time.
Tuna fish.
Oh, whatever. Anything to actually get together in one place. So, look, I was very much looking forward after November 3rd to a 2021 that would have less drama and more productivity. And then there I was sitting in the House chamber on January 6th, trying to focus on what should have been a very ceremonial and uninteresting session, certifying the election. And then the rest is a very, very ugly history, which you all know. And Rabbi Kroloff and I didn't actually talk about this before the session, but my mind was on those dates as well. I was going to mention January 6th, and then I was going to mention January 20th, because on both of those days, I had the great privilege to be in or at the United States Capitol. On January 6th, it was desecrated. It was attacked by people who quite literally wanted to overthrow our democratic system of government, although of course they saw it differently. That's what they were doing. And on January 20th, we all came together, some of us physically, many of us virtually from around the country and around the world, to witness an extraordinarily moving ceremony on the steps of that Capitol, marking a tradition which remains unbroken in America. despite Civil War, World War II, multiple national crises that we have faced as a nation since the founding of our nation, this tradition of a peaceful, well, in this case, at least on January 20th, it was peaceful transfer of power from one elected leader to another, remains unbroken. And I hope all of you felt the sense of hope and promise that I felt listening, not just to President Biden, but to all of the speakers at that wonderful ceremony, who I think beautifully encapsulated what America is and what we stand for. We are not a perfect country, but we are the promise of the world because we have within ourselves the capacity to become more perfect, to acknowledge honestly our injustices and our problems, and to confront them through the hard work of democracy. That's the meaning of America. And so I do, despite the drama and despite the near miss, because the last 4 years, we've very nearly lost this great experiment in democracy. I see this as a moment of great promise. I feel kind of like I'm in that proverb, you know, where you say that the roof has fallen in, but now I can see the sun. And so let's talk about that. Many of us over the last 2 or 3 years have had conversations about the rising threat of violent extremism in the United States, which manifests often as anti-Semitism. The threat posed by white supremacist, neo-Nazi, racist ideologies and organizations that have always existed, but that have gained new adherents because of social media, because these hatreds and conspiracy theories spread wildly online today, and because they have been amplified and legitimized by leaders in our country, including the former president of the United States. We've been talking about that for 3 years. And I've been reporting back to you on the efforts that I've been making in Washington to try to counter this threat. Well, on January 6th, the whole country woke up. When I was in that gallery, I mean, it was a scary moment, but part of me, even in that moment, was thinking, finally, people are going to get it. That this isn't just words. This isn't just a bunch of crazy people out there who we don't have to worry about. And indeed, that is now the case. We are now at the start of the first unified national effort, led by a unified national government, to address proactively the threat that these groups, these individuals, and these ideologies pose to us, to the fabric of our society, and to our safety individually. I'm sure you all noticed that what happened on January 6th in Washington was not repeated on January 20th. And that was not because these guys lost interest in attacking our democracy. It's because we were playing offense. It's because the FBI and state and local police forces around the country were fanning out and arresting people who took part in the riots on January 6th, because we're now putting pressure on these groups because their communications have been, in many cases, just taken down because their social media networks like Parler were actually physically taken down for a while because certain influential people are no longer on Twitter, and because they're feeling very much on the defensive. And that's just 2 weeks of work, which is going to continue. I have redoubled my efforts. I've joined the Homeland Security Committee in the House on top of the other 2 committees I serve on, Foreign Affairs and Transportation and Infrastructure. And I am leading an effort right now to put meaningful pressure on the big social media companies, Facebook, Twitter, Google, to not just block racist, anti-Semitic stuff when it pops up on the internet, but to fundamentally redesign their social networks so that the virality of that hateful message is finally dampened, because the networks, Facebook, for example, it is absolutely designed. If you start like an anti-Semitic movement or group or a conspiracy theory mongering organization, Facebook is designed to scour the entire planet and to find every single person who might be susceptible to your hateful message and to introduce them to you, right? Just as it's designed to introduce, you know, the organizers of a dog appreciation club to everybody who loves dogs. It's just designed to connect people based on common interest, including common interest in anti-Semitism and fascism and hatred and violence. And that engine that gives everybody more extreme versions of what they already believe, more hateful versions of what they hate, more fearful versions of what they fear. That is the thing that has to be addressed. And so we just shot off, with me in the lead, a letter signed by dozens of members of Congress to those companies saying they've got to change their network design, their algorithms. We can talk more about that in detail if you guys want. And we have legislation, because I don't expect them to do it just because we're asking. We've got legislation that we are reintroducing in this Congress, which I'm going to work hard to get Joe Biden behind to make sure that we actually do that. That's going to be one of my main projects for the coming 2 years. But beyond that, you know, everybody is seized with this now. And that is a very, very good thing, because I hate playing defense. I hate putting up fences. I hate putting up security cameras. I hate putting up bulletproof glass. We have to do that. We got federal money to help our places of worship do that, but I hate it. I want to play offense. I want to take the fight to these Nazis and make them 10 times more afraid of us than we are of them. So that's my goal. And then, speaking of promise, I see just amazing promise in having an administration that that can work with a majority in the House and a majority in the Senate to solve problems rather than to create problems, rather than to divide people. I really, really believe in President Biden's message of unity, so long as it's understood as I think he wants us to understand it, which is that, you know, it's not that every Republican now has to become a Democrat, or that every Democrat has to agree with Republicans just for the sake of some artificial unity. But even as we disagree on policy, we ought to come together around the principle that the purpose of government is to help people. It's to serve people. It is to solve problems. It is not drama. It is not theater. It is not a reality show. It's about, for now, for example, crushing this pandemic as a #1 national priority, as a practical problem, not some ideological issue, just a practical problem. And so if the science says wear masks, then of course we should be wearing masks. That shouldn't be ideological. It's about restoring the economy. As we all get that shot in the arm with the vaccine, giving the economy a shot in the arm so that people don't lose their homes and their businesses and their jobs and their ability to go to school. And we're going to have, I think, a considerable amount of unity across party lines on that in the coming weeks. It's about addressing practical problems like climate change. It's about fixing our nation's infrastructure. It's about continuing to improve equity and access to healthcare in our country. And we can disagree about the details, but we ought to agree that our job as members of Congress or as national leaders, president, vice president, is to come to work every single day, single-mindedly focused on what is the best way to solve those problems, not how do we set people against each other with fake fights on social media. It's about how to solve those problems. And so I just see a lot of promise in a moment where, you know, not everyone in Congress is convinced of what I just said, but I think a healthy majority are, and the president 1000% wants to lead the country in that way and is going to spend the next few weeks trying to work with us to put forward ambitious, pragmatic plans to deal with those issues. And we will have an opportunity, because again, it's a unified government with Democrats in a very narrow majority in the Senate as well as in the House. Narrow meaning we'll still have to make compromises, but majority meaning we will actually be able to put legislation on the floor, get it to the president's desk, get action that helps people. And so I'm really, really excited about that and determined that we do everything we can to prove over the next few months that we are capable of delivering, because the country needs it, and because by delivering on issues like COVID relief and restarting the economy and investing in infrastructure and improving our healthcare system, protecting the environment, I hope we'll also begin to restore some of the faith that many Americans have lost in the capacity of government to work effectively in their interest and consistent with their values. So a lot of individual issues, specific issues we can discuss under that umbrella, but I think I want to save that for the Q&A, because I want to be guided by your interests and your questions, and take as much time as we possibly can in the remaining time that we have to address what is on your mind. So with that, I will stop, say thank you again, and then look forward to your questions and comments.
Great. Thank you very much. And as you say in Hebrew, Yasher Koach. You know that expression, Tom, Yasher Koach? It's
don't actually.
What? Yeah?
I don't actually.
It's well done. It's strength be to you. We'll do that in our next Hebrew lesson, okay?
Yes, Rabbi.
The first question, I want to turn to David Golish, because right after we announced that you'd be with us, David sent me a question about 5 minutes after the announcement. I promised him that I thought it'd be appropriate that he asked the first question, since it was the first question. So David, can David unmute Rabbi? Yeah, Rabbi Prosnit's can unmute you. Okay, we good? Good. David.
Hi, David. Congressman, thanks for coming.
Hey, David.
After COVID, I think the biggest challenge we have in America is the lack of good jobs. America never recovered the jobs we lost to globalization. Now automation will continue these massive job cuts. What path do you see to overcome this worldwide problem?
Yeah. So I think the first, most obvious, most impactful thing that we can do is to begin a massive investment in fixing, upgrading, modernizing our country's infrastructure. And there are a lot of reasons to do that. Number one, there's stuff that needs to be fixed, right? New Jersey, we see it every day. We've got our Marquee projects like the Gateway Tunnel, the Hudson River Tunnel that desperately, urgently needs to be repaired and added to. Our highways, our airports, our ports, our train stations. Compare our transportation system alone to those of any other modern wealthy society in the world, and it's a disgrace where we are. So number one, it's needed. Number two, in making these investments, we're going to create a lot of jobs, not just the people who will be doing the work of constructing and building and fixing, but all of the support that they will need, and then the wealth that is generated by that, which then supports a whole bunch of other jobs in our community, service sector jobs, restaurant jobs, retail jobs, as folks directly involved in the reconstruction of our physical infrastructure are doing better. And then finally, if we make such an investment right now, and by the way, now is the time when interest rates are basically zero, to be borrowing for the future in that way, we can also direct that investment in a way that speeds our country's transition to clean energy. So if we're investing in transportation systems, we can emphasize rail over automobile. To the extent we're investing in highways, make them smarter highways, invest in electrical charging stations, invest in upgrading our country's electrical grid so that as more and more things are powered by electricity, as we hope, we actually have the capacity to deliver all of that electricity in a reliable way to every part of the country. So out of this crisis, I see that enormous opportunity. And I don't think that needs to be a partisan issue as well. I think most of my pragmatic Republican friends on the Hill would agree with everything I just said. We might argue a little bit about the clean energy part and just how much emphasis to place on that. But I would like to be able to convince them that that's not that's not some wild progressive idea. That in fact it is very much in America's economic and national security interest to be the country that leads the world in that transition. I don't want China to lead the world. I want the United States to do it. And so I think that's an argument that will ultimately cut across party lines.
Thank you for that. I want to remind you all that we have a couple of questions in the chat room, but please add them because I think we'll have time for a number of these questions. Before that, I wanted to ask Rabbi Prosnit to raise an issue that he raised with Mayor Brindle and me a few minutes ago that I know is on your mind.
Yeah, thank you. So just this weekend, for those reading local newspapers, there were stickers found that on light posts, I think on the south side of town in Westfield, with connected to a white supremacist group. Nothing, it was their logo, it was their symbol, nothing calling out specific minority groups. But I know that it is a concern in our town. Mayor, I don't know if you can just update us a little bit about exactly what happened, and then maybe Congressman, what can we do? You talked a little bit about social media, but are there other things that we can continue to work towards to make sure that these voices aren't amplified?
Thank you, Rabbi. First of all, say thank you, Rabbi Kroloff, for inviting me today. And thank you, a belated thanks to you, Rabbi Prosnit, for participating in our COVID remembrance ceremony last week, which was incredibly moving. And thank you for your leadership on that. In response, yes, I think we haven't confirmed 5 to 7 of these stickers posted on street signs around town for this organization that has been tied to they've been identified as a white nationalist group. And so the stickers have all been taken down. It was reported, and our local police department is investigating, but very importantly, the Union County prosecutor's office is investigating. And I said, I'd like to think that it was not a Westfield resident that did that, but I'm not naive enough to think that it couldn't be, right? And I also like to think after the January 6th resurrection that this is really what I like to think a last gasp effort for these people who have been empowered for way too long to assert their what they, their power, if you will, when I think that they are going to see, as the Congressman mentioned, hopefully a very aggressive national effort to just root these people out. And as we all know, they've been enabled and empowered for far too long. And, and I know our local and county prosecutor's office are going to be working in collaboration with the federal government to make sure that they have no voice and no mechanism to attract or amplify their voices. So, yeah, it's incredibly disturbing on so many levels, but the only thing that gives me hope are the things that the Congressman mentioned, and a lot of those levers of amplification are going to be taken away if they haven't already.
Yep.
Thank you. So, Congressman, before you respond, I want to just link to that first question in our chat room because it's related to this, and that is bravo. This is from Eleanor and Jeff Paris. Bravo, but what is the probability of achieving change needed on these social media sites? So with that and our local issue, turn to you.
Yeah, sure. So I just heard about these stickers actually from you guys prior to the call. It's the group being advertised apparently is something called the Patriot Front, which is indeed a, I would describe it as an openly fascist neo-Nazi organization, part of this very broad and fragmented, I hope increasingly fragmented, far-right militia racist movement in our country. They were involved in the Charlottesville demonstrations. I wouldn't be surprised if some of these guys from this particular group were present at the Capitol on January 6th. I'm very happy to see that there has been a strong law enforcement response. I'm guessing we don't know exactly, how many people were behind this. It could be just one guy putting up 6 stickers, right, in hopes of making thousands of people scared. But at this point, it is prudent to take every manifestation of this very, very seriously. And as I mentioned, to make sure we are playing offense and not defense. So I know that Mayor Brindle will keep me apprised of this because I very much want to see how it's resolved and whatever intelligence you guys can garner. Let me say a few more things about the big picture here. As I mentioned, there are a lot of these groups out there, and some of them are so obviously and explicitly odious that no politician in this country, I think, would be stupid enough to associate with them. But then there are others that are really maybe one step away from the group being advertised on those stickers. Groups like the Proud Boys, for example, and the Oath Keepers, which has active chapters in the state of New Jersey and which specializes in recruiting former military and law enforcement officers, ostensibly to stand up for, American patriotism and American ideas. They got very much involved in the so-called Stop the Steal movement to overturn this election, that are also fundamentally racist and I believe anti-Semitic. And, I'm not polite about this. Donald Trump absolutely encouraged explicitly these groups by name, retweeting their content online, calling out to the Proud Boys in one of his debates with Joe Biden. There are politicians in the state of New Jersey who've run for high office in our state, who have fundraised with people from these groups, appeared with them at their events, publicly defended them, particularly the Oath Keepers. And that has to end. And, we're going to have a debate in America about the meaning of the word unity over the next few months. And some people are going to argue that me saying what I just said is divisive. They're going to argue for a definition of unity that is not actually meant to bring the country together, but it is meant to shield them from feeling any sense of stigma and shame for their role in allowing this poison to enter the mainstream of American political life, for allowing these people, like the people who stormed the Capitol, to believe that they were doing something good and right, not something deviant and criminal. And so what I need from, when I address my Republican colleagues in the House, many of whom, by the way, have been incredibly courageous in standing up to this, like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger, but the others. What I say to them is, I do not need you to be any less Republican, any less conservative than you are. I do not need you to agree with Joe Biden's policy agenda. But if we want unity in this country, I absolutely need you explicitly to say these people are terrorists. And we will not consort with them. We will not give them aid or comfort. They should be targeted by law enforcement. They are criminals. They are terrorists. We want nothing to do with them. And it's a hard thing for some of my colleagues to do because their lives are at risk right now. They're getting death threats. And because, frankly, some of these people make up now an influential part of their party in some parts of this country. In Arizona, where basically the Republican Party of Arizona just passed resolutions condemning the McCain family and their own governor because they accepted Joe Biden's victory, right? There is a strain of radicalism right now that has taken root in a part of that party, and it has to be rejected because it is just one step removed from a neo-Nazi fascist organization putting up stickers in the town of Westfield telling you to be afraid. And we just can't have that anymore. And then moving to the question on social media, how likely it is, it's going to be a big fight because, again, I'm not just challenging Twitter to banish racists or Nazis or Holocaust deniers or conspiracy theorists from their site. I'm not just asking them to play whack-a-mole, take down this account, take down that person. I'm asking them to change the design of their social network. And the network is designed that way, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, it's designed that way because that's what makes them the most money. Because they figured out that if we are fed, we, the users of these networks, if we're fed content that reinforces our existing feelings and emotions, whether they're good, healthy emotions or not healthy emotions, we will spend more time staring at the screen. We'll stay more time engaged with their platform, and therefore we'll see more ads and we'll buy more stuff and they'll make more money, right? So they will resist this because this is the goose that lays the golden egg for them. But after January 6th, I think we'll be able to generate very significant pressure. And interestingly, most of these companies at various points in the last year or so have temporarily made changes to their networks in the direction that I would like to see them go, but only temporarily, like just before the election or on an experimental basis. So they've shown their hand, they've shown they can do it, which means all we really have to do is to say, make those things permanent, make those things not just experimental, but system-wide. And, you're smart people, you can figure out other ways of remaining the wealthiest and most successful companies in the world.
We have a host of wonderful questions. I'll take a couple more from the chat room, and then I'm going to ask Rabbi Prosnit to take us into the Q&A. We won't get to everybody, but we'll just keep asking you back, Congressman. Just in order, Carol Cohen asked about the likelihood of the $1,400 additional stimulus bill. And then after that, we have a question on filibuster.
Sure. So I don't know the likelihood right now. I'm sure, Carol, you've been reading the stories about members of the Senate, some Republicans, but also some Democrats expressing concern about the expense of the proposal that Joe Biden made. And it's not just the checks, the $1,400 checks on top of the $600 checks promised by the last bill. That gets all the attention in these stimulus bills. It's often, I think, the least important part. There's a lot of other stuff in Biden's proposal to help state and local governments, including Westfield, pay their bills through this crisis. a very generous child tax credit, which would cut child poverty in America in half. By the way, if it were up to me and you gave me $200 or $300 billion and told me I could choose between the stimulus checks and that child tax credit, I'd choose the child tax credit personally. There's the rental assistance, there's small business assistance, there's a lot of other things that we're going to be debating. And my guess is there's going to be a little bit of give and take and compromise, but we are going to pass something. Here's the advantage that we have now that we didn't have a month ago or 2 months ago. Mitch McConnell is not the majority leader of the US Senate anymore, which means he cannot block a vote on proposals like this. We still need to negotiate. We still need to take into account the views of more moderate senators on both sides of the aisle, in my opinion. With the 50-50 split, we can talk about why that is if people like. But at the end of the day, Majority Leader Schumer can put a COVID-19 relief and stimulus bill on the floor of the United States Senate, and force everybody to vote yes or no. And so the challenge right now is to get something on the floor of the Senate and of course the House that we feel will get hopefully 60 senators to say yes when they're actually put on the spot to say yes or no to more help for their constituents. And I do think we'll get there. So, and the filibuster you asked about.
Speaking of 60 senators,
yeah. So look, I'll tell you, I'm against the filibuster as it has evolved. As many of you know, the filibuster was not part of the original constitutional design of the United States Senate. There's nothing in the Constitution that says you need 60 votes to pass a bill in the US Senate. The first filibuster didn't happen until the 1830s. And from that point on, it was employed, but very rarely, mostly when an issue arose that a minority of senators felt strongly enough about that they were willing to use that extraordinary mechanism. And basically under McConnell, mostly in the last 10, 15 years, it has evolved into a routine procedure under which the minority blocks literally every proposal made by the majority, unless the majority can muster 60 votes. And that is not only not in the constitutional design, I would argue is unconstitutional, because it's almost as if we've created a new rule that you need 60 votes rather than a majority to pass something in the Senate. So as a matter of principle, I would be all for getting rid of it. As a matter of practicality, I want to spend the next 2 years passing legislation, sending things to Joe Biden, showing the American people what government can do, and then being judged by them in 2 years on what we have done, not on what we haven't done, right? So that's where I am as a matter of principle and practicality. But to change the rule, you need a majority. You don't need 60, but you do need 50 plus the vice president to change the rule. And we don't have that right now, because at least one of the Democratic senators, Joe Manchin, has said that he doesn't want to end the filibuster. So, everyone says, oh, all the Democrats at least tell me, gosh, you've got the majority now, you can do what you want. That's not true. So what I think is going to happen is, look, we're going to test this. We are going, we are going to see what can be done, not in the next few months, but literally in the next few weeks, on these urgent issues of crushing the pandemic, helping the economy, helping people who are struggling within the framework that we've got, because we have to, unless Mr. Manchin changes his mind. And if McConnell leads the Republicans in total obstruction of everything that we are doing, then I think that creates I hope that creates an insurmountable argument for getting rid of the filibuster. And we'll test it again on COVID relief, the Voting Rights Act, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, something that we are going to put forward, I think, and certainly pass in the House very, very soon. Something Republicans in the Senate used to vote for almost unanimously. So let's see, because we can make them vote now.
So on a legislative issue, someone asked, have we completely given up on gun control?
Gosh, no, I haven't, and we haven't. We will certainly, I think, early in this session, pass once again in the House the universal background check bill that we passed before. And remember, in the Senate, there was a universal background check bill agreement led by the aforementioned Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Senator Pat Toomey, Republican of Pennsylvania. And, you know, so again, classic example of good government, somebody on the Democratic side, Republican side, working hard to come up with a pragmatic solution to a problem, and it never got a vote because McConnell was blocking things, even things that could have won, right? He had that power. So absolutely, we are going to, I mean, I can't speak for Chuck Schumer, but I think it's safe to assume that he is going to put a background check bill to a vote in the United States Senate. I would imagine that he would be working with those two senators. And again, the Republicans will face a test. Are they going to block that? What if we have 56, 57 votes for that? Are they going to use the filibuster to block that? 90% of the American people support it. If they do, by the way, and it's Joe Manchin's bill, then I think our argument for getting rid of the filibuster becomes that much stronger.
Just add, Pam Bernstein just added, why can't it be called gun safety instead of gun control?
We do, yeah. So we always, these days, talk about it in terms of gun safety, gun violence prevention. This is not about taking guns away from people who use them for home defense or for hunting. These are sensible, pragmatic measures to prevent gun homicides and suicides.
Prosnit,
yeah, there's been a lot of questions about unity, and you've spoken about that, specifically around the second impeachment trial. How do we move forward, if convicted or acquitted, and how unified could we be after that vote? There's a question also about how can you be unified when you are working with people in your colleagues who have not denounced hate groups as well. And so can you discuss that a little bit?
Sure. So, you know, coming back to this again, unity cannot mean that we all agree with each other, because that would be artificial. And it's fine that we disagree on things, on policy issues. Unity doesn't mean Republicans have to become Democrats or the Democrats have to limit our vision to only that which Republicans are willing to go along with, right? That's not what it is. Unity, I think, means that we should find solidarity and agreement on ideals and concepts and principles that should bring Americans together, like telling the truth, right? We ought to be able to agree. You could be a conservative Republican, a liberal Democrat. We should agree that we should be telling the truth, that honesty matters, and that those who are dishonest should feel some stigma and even accountability. We should have unity around the rule of law in this country. Everybody needs to obey the law, and those who don't should feel some stigma and accountability. We should have unity around respect for our democratic system of government, which means that all of us will be disappointed sometimes. in the outcome of an election, but we should believe in and support the system that empowers the American people to make that choice. We should be unified in opposition to extremism and violence and conspiracy theories. You know, that's not a lot to ask. Unfortunately, in the last 4 years, it's become a relevant question to ask. So I think, you know, that's what I mean when I talk about unity. I think that's what Joe Biden means. And that does mean that when we face a question like impeachment, I think the unifying position is not to say, well, we just forgive egregious conduct so that we can avoid an argument, so that we can avoid a conflict. What we ought to do is unify around the rule of law. And, you know, it's a very conservative idea, actually, that there should be stigma and accountability for egregious behavior. And I, you know, I'm pretty close to being 100% confident right now that if everybody in the Senate could just vote their conscience, that former President Trump would be convicted. But I fear he won't be, because a lot of the Republican members are afraid of political death and even physical violence right now if they vote to convict him. And, you know, for me, that in and of itself is an argument for impeachment. Like, if the man is responsible for fomenting a movement in this country that is going to threaten to kill you if you vote to hold him accountable, then that is in and of itself a reason to hold him accountable. And that's what's happening right now. I have absolutely no hesitation in believing that this is the right thing to do. And then when it's done, Mitch McConnell and I are going to disagree on 90% of the policy issues, and we'll have at it, and that's fine, right? And people can agree with him or agree with me. That's totally fine. Meanwhile, in the House, like, how can I serve with these people? The House has always been a very diverse body. It's one of the charms, right? That there are people from all walks of life. You know, if you and I had walked into the House chamber in the 19th century, you know, we'd probably find a lot of disreputable characters wandering around. People would be bringing their guns and their knives onto the floor of the House, and there were fights and near-death experiences, right? So this is new. And my response to it isn't that everybody in the House needs to be a respectable person who always be, you know, that's not it. I'm okay with some wackos being there. What I'm not okay with is rules being broken with impunity, right? Getting back to the need for some stigma and accountability when rules are broken. And so one thing I'm doing is I'm the lead sponsor of a resolution to censure one of my House colleagues, Congressman named Mo Brooks from Alabama, not Mel Brooks, Mo Brooks, who on the morning of January 6th addressed the crowd, the mob that was gathering to march on the Capitol. And after calling out mostly his Republican colleagues as traitors, he said, today is the day when American patriots start taking down names and kicking ass. And we can do that on the way to the Capitol. So we're going to censure him, and I'm going to be leading that effort, because again, I think we all have freedom of speech to say crazy, awful things, but we can also use our freedom of speech to shame those who do. And so that's my approach.
Before we go on, I'm looking at the time. It's 12:25. Can we go to 12:40, Congressman? Does your schedule permit us to do that? Tell us. If not, we'll wrap it up earlier.
Yeah, I think so. Hold on just one sec. Yes, we can do that.
Right, so I'll share a couple of the questions that are coming in, and then maybe you can answer.
Good, and then I have one question to wrap up, Rabbi. So you want to share a couple of those, and
Great.
Yeah.
A couple questions on COVID-19, how President Biden wants to reopen schools, concern about teachers not being able to get the vaccine. How soon will they be able to receive it? As well as questions about the Gateway Project. I know this is close to Mayor Brindle's heart as well. Does his definition include expansion of the Raritan Valley trains to go straight to Penn Station? Is that part of the
Stop there, because that's a lot. So Gateway Project, Hudson River Tunnel, Portal Bridge, that's been my preoccupation the last couple of years. We got the Portal Bridge funded, approved, it's going up. We did that even with Donald Trump in the White House. I was very happy that we achieved that. Hudson River Tunnel will now be funded and approved, I'm confident, with Joe Biden and Secretary Pete at Department of Transportation. I will stay on it until all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed. But we you know, I don't see right now any reason to doubt that. There are a lot of things Joe Biden can do administratively without Congress having to take any additional actions to get that project off the ground. And so next few weeks, early months of this administration, I expect to see those steps taken. If not, I'll be very angry, but I think we'll be there. Raritan Valley line, one-seat ride. You know, I've never discussed this issue with Shelley Brindle before. No, just kidding. So of course, the ultimate fix there is to finish the Gateway Project, right? Because when we have 2 Hudson River tunnels, or 4 tubes rather than 2 tubes, then one-seat ride will be easy. In the meantime, as we've often discussed, it's a zero-sum game. It's about moving resources around. I strongly believe that within current resources, there's more that New Jersey Transit can do. For example, by adding direct service to New York at what they refer to as the kind of shoulder hours, like just after and just before the main rush hour, which I think would be quite helpful, especially as our schedules are now so mixed up. And so we've been putting pressure on them to do that as the next step. So stay tuned there. But the long-term solution, obviously, is the tunnel. Teachers, schools, vaccines. I've been a little frustrated there with our state. Honestly, it is a state decision. It's a decision that the governor and his team need to make as to how they prioritize things. And you know, the big problem now is supply. We've opened the vaccine to a very large cohort of people in the state of New Jersey. We don't have enough supply to actually vaccinate all of them. But I have made the case to the governor that teachers should be at the front of the line, not because they are more at risk than, say, residents of long-term care facilities, but because there is such a powerful social need to get our schools physically open again. For the well-being of the kids, for the well-being of the parents, we've been reminded in this crisis just how important having school open is to all of us, to everything, to the way in which we lead our lives. And so I would put teachers at the head of the line for that reason. And I'm going to continue to make that case.
So I have a question from Steve Barkan that I thought would be a very good wrap up for us. It's a softball question. It's also a hardball. And that is, what advice would you give to an idealistic college freshman coming to DC in the fall who's interested in politics? What would be your advice?
So stay idealistic despite everything, number one. You know, we've had a chance in the last few months and the last 4 years to prove the wisdom of Churchill's saying that democracy is the worst system of government ever invented, except for all the others. So I think we have a lot of good reasons for idealism about American democracy right now. Everything just barely worked. We had a president who, in my view, wanted to turn the system upside down. And in his final days, think about what he did. He demanded that members of his party who run election systems in our states around the country throw the election to him. And they were members of his party. They voted for him. They supported him. They were upset that he lost. And they all said no. Then he asked his own Justice Department to try to overturn the election for him. His own Justice Department, people he'd appointed who served him, who were loyal to him. And they said no. They threatened to resign rather than do that. Then he asked the United States Congress, members of his own party, who voted for him, who were loyal to him, who were disappointed that he lost, fix this so that I can win. And most of them said no. Too many said yes in the House, but almost all of them in the Senate said no, and a strong majority in both bodies said no. And then when he sent a mob, or encouraged a mob to march on us and intimidate us to prevent us from doing our jobs, well, you know, we're human. We didn't want to be killed, so we evacuated the building for a few hours. But the moment we got the all clear, the moment that blood was wiped off the floor, literally, we marched back into that building and we certified this election. Everybody did their job. Everyone did their duty. And over the last 4 years, consistently, courts, our free press, our civic society, and ultimately, of course, voters in 2018 and 2020, we did what we were supposed to do to keep this system going. And so, you know, you're living, if you're a college freshman, you're living in really interesting times. I'm sorry about that, but also they're interesting in a way that I think should reinforce our faith that this is an amazing privilege that we have to live in this democratic system. The things I just described to you could not possibly have happened in Russia or in China or in Saudi Arabia or in most of the countries in the world where the leader would have gotten his way. So that's one. Number two, you should come intern on the Hill. Get an opportunity, if you can, to see how things work in practice. And you'll see all the imperfections, and you'll see all the frustrations that we have in Congress or in an executive branch agency. Things are hard to get done, but I think you'll also get an appreciation of how decent most of the people who work in the system are. Most of them are motivated by genuine belief in public service, and you'll learn how to overcome the obstacles and frustrations, so that in the future, if you run for office, if you become a public servant yourself, you'll be better, you'll be more effective and happier. So that would be my advice.
And in the last couple of minutes we have, advice to each of us who aren't college freshmen. Advice to us, 1, 2 things that we should be doing in the coming months and year.
I don't think my advice would be that different, actually, except Rabbi Kroloff, I guess I'm not going to advise that you get an internship on Capitol Hill. I mean, you could, theoretically.
It might make news. We could both be in the news.
You might get
but, you know, I think we do have the luxury right now of being able to step back a little bit, to take a little pride in what we did in the last 4 years as members of an engaged community that cares about our country. We all stepped up in different ways, as educators, as leaders, political candidates, activists, lawyers, journalists. And it became an obsession for a lot of people, right? Because we became obsessively concerned about the state of our country, and we were thinking about politics every single day. And I don't want people to disengage, but I think I would want to give everybody permission to not think about politics every day too. You know, I'm having this strange transition where, you know, I'm reading about all the things that this new administration is doing that are sensible and principled. And it makes me think, well, what am I supposed to do now? Maybe. And then, you know, eventually I'm back to, well, there's a positive, constructive agenda that I can help promote, and that's what I'll be doing. But it's an adjustment. I don't have to be upset, angry, and anxious every moment. I can relax a little bit with the confidence that there are really good people in positions of responsibility who are doing their best, and I trust them. They may make mistakes, but I trust them basically to try to do the right thing. And that's a liberating feeling. And I would encourage everybody to take a deep breath and feel that. But then, you know, we do have to get back to work, because the lesson of the last 4 years is that this is a never-ending story. And we will continue to be called on to be stewards of this democracy. And so, you know, the stuff that you were doing the last 4 years, you may not have to obsess about it every moment of every day, but we are going to have to keep doing it. And I'll be there, and we'll continue to have these community conversations. And, you know, I get a lot out of hearing from everybody, because you give me my priorities, and I enjoy discussing with you how I wrestle with the complicated choices that we have to make.
This has been marvelous. You've been with us a number of times. This has been, I think, one of the very best. You give us a sense of well-being and confidence as well. You know, I can't speak for everybody on this Zoom, but when we talk to friends and families in other districts and other parts of the country, we tell them how proud we are that you're our congressman. So keep up the good work. Thanks to your wonderful staff. Lisa Mandelblatt, our congregant, was very helpful arranging today. Thank you, Mayor Brindle. Thank you, Rabbi Prosnit, Jackie Groscott, all of you for being with us. And we look forward to this again. Congressman, be safe and continue to lead us with your wisdom and your compassion.
Thank you so much, Rabbi.
Everybody be safe.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Happy Tu B'Shvat, everybody, the end of the week.
Thank you.